Detection Collaborative, a detection dog training trio with Stacy Barnett.
Hi.
Robin Greubel.
Hey there.
And Crystal Wing.
What's up?
With humor and a big dose of theory, our trio talks practical training advice and features interviews with top trainers and scientists. It's Canine Detection Collaborative.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Canine Detection Collaborative. I am here with my super duper co-hosts, Crystal Wing.
Hello.
And Stacy Barnett.
Hello.
And we have just literally spent 45 minutes reading an article.
Skimming.
Because what? Oh, skimming. Actually,
Skimming.
Okay, it was skimming.
This is skimming. This is
skimming because
hours.
this is something that Robin will print off and take on a plane somewhere. But it all stemmed from us having a conversation of being mentally prepared to train. And how do we prepare our dogs to be in the mental space to train? And how do we get ourselves put in a spot to be mentally prepared to train? And primary example of me this morning, because as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, my office is in my basement. And when you are doing Zoom meetings that do not require you to have the camera up, you can go to work in your pajamas.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Which
after
happens.
a really long commute.
Yes.
After a really long commute, right?
I can't wear pajamas to school.
Downstairs.
That would not be good.
No, you can't. But let's keep in mind my pajamas are a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. But I'm literally sitting down.
People are now probably like thinking about like a onesie with like little ears and like the big, like the tail on it, and it's like, whatever.
No, my current nightshirt says when the tailgate drops, the BS stops, shut up and train. That's what my
there you go.
says.
There
So
you go.
I literally was talking to my friend Natalie today, and she's like, well, what are you going to go do after your conference call? Because we were texting. And I said, well, I have to be mentally prepared to train. She's like, well, what's that entail? And I'm like, getting out of my pajamas. But it also had, having a plan. And what am I working on today? And so we were talking about that. And some of it for me is, unless I have a specific goal, sometimes being in that grind to train all the time gets really exhausting. So Crystal has a trial set up coming up, and Stacy has a summit and some other things coming up. And just the constant, because you know what? If you don't keep the skills sharp, they're not going to go anywhere. And then Crystal's like, hey, let's talk about this. And then we went,
and I'm like, oh, that's deep.
Yeah. And then we went down a rabbit hole about
but it was really
stress.
Really cool.
And stress in handlers, which of course goes to certifications and goes to testing and goes to competition and all of the things, and still being mentally prepared to go do the thing.
I think a lot of it too is we have to think about the difference between learning and testing again. And that's where the stress needs to be really considered, and how we incrementally apply stress. And I think we do a good job of that at Distraction Camp, where we have it hopefully low stress and very known and very comfort for our handlers. And then by the end of the week, they're more comfortable with what's happening. And then we can apply more stress to the handlers and kind of apply distractions in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's that old adage, don't train a stressed dog. And if we start thinking of it in terms of maybe don't teach a stressed dog.
Yes.
Or, versus training, right?
And that comes to us too. So I think we're better off. I've had so many people that, they're like, I'm just really stressed right now. I'm like, don't train.
Right.
If you can go play with your dog and that'll make both of your moods better, do that. That's excellent training. But to go train when you're not in the right headspace, you're not doing your dog any favors.
No, you're not.
So that's where this study came in, that it was back in July. And it talks about how the odor of what is it called? Do you have the title of it, Robin? So I don't say it wrong.
The title of the study?
Yeah.
Is the odor of an unfamiliar, stressed, or relaxed person affect dogs' responses to a cognitive bias test? We'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's out of Nature.
Out of Nature. That sounds
well.
funny.
It's out of the Nature magazine or whatever. Yeah.
We want to kind of summarize the study to our
listeners.
Understanding.
Dogs can discriminate stress from non-stressed human odors samples. And keep in mind, this is from Europe, so I have to read past all of the weird misspellings because I'm an American and the world revolves around me.
Misspellings?
Yes.
Oh, so we just lost most of our listeners.
I know, we did.
Evening Color doesn't have a U?
But keep in mind, I did openly admit that I am American. So per the rest of the world, it does the world revolves around us.
So you can still like two of the three of us and still listen.
Yes, you can.
No.
And I'm being so totally sarcastic. You guys can't see me. But yes. Okay. Anyway.
Let me spell check your odor and just taking those U's out.
Yep. Dogs can discriminate stressed from non-stressed human odor samples, but the effect on their cognition is unstudied. Using a cognitive bias task, we tested how human odor affects dogs' likelihood of approaching a food bowl placed at 3 ambiguous locations, near positive, middle, and near negative, between trained positive, rewarded, or negative, unrewarded locations. Using odor samples collected from 3 unfamiliar volunteers during stressful and relaxing activities, we tested 18 dogs under 3 conditions: no odor, stress odor, and relaxed odor, with the order of the test odors counterbalanced across the dogs. Okay, so everybody think about all of that. When exposed to stress odor during 3 sessions, dogs were significantly less likely to approach a bowl placed at one of the 3 ambiguous locations, near negative, compared to no odor, indicating possible risk reduction behaviors in response to the smell of human stress. Dogs' learning of trained positive and negative locations improved with repeat testing and were significant between sessions 2 and 3 only when exposed to stress odor during session 3, suggesting odor-influenced learning. This is the first study to show that without visual or auditory cue, olfactory cues of human stress may affect dogs' cognition and learning, which, if true, could have important consequences for dog welfare and working performance. So, Crystal, did you want to summarize that?
It gets me all excited thinking about this because it was mainly in session 3 that they saw a large impact. So if I'm understanding it correctly, so the dogs that had the relaxing odor, so the humans had to wear a heart monitor, they had to do an arithmetic test, they had to get stressed out, they did a saliva collection, they also had to wear pads under their armpits, and then they had to breathe on that pad before they put it, and then they froze it and they put it into a jar. So then, it sounds like from what we've read so far that it was really well done, it seems. Again, I'm not a scientist. I am not trained to read studies. So don't take anything. This is an art teacher saying, wow, this looks great.
Well, it's an art teacher and the rest of us, as we are skimming the article going, oh my goodness, that looks really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. These are things to consider.
Yeah.
But what jumped out at me, there are several things. I like how they describe it as optimistic and pessimistic. And they have different ways of discussing how they rate that. But I appreciate those terms and talking about the dog's behaviors or their mannerisms. And I like how they talk about different ways of testing that based on the amount of time that the dog reacts. They also only gave the cue once. And so then they allowed that just to be the thing. And I appreciate that. And I'm going to see how I want to use that possibly in my data collection. So I'm interested in doing that. What I liked about towards the end while I was reading was if the dog had 2 relaxed sessions, they did 3 sessions total. In the first and second session, they smelled the relaxed human. So dog went to the positive, went to the negative bowl. The positive bowl always had food. The negative bowl was always in the other locations and it never had food. And so on the first and second, it went to the positive bowl the same, went to the negative bowl the same. On the third one, they introduced the stress in between. And in that group, it made the largest impact. And if I understand it, the impact for the positive bowl, that they actually went there a little faster. And the one for the negative bowl, they went way slower, if at all. And so that was the group that had the largest impact. And we were kind of talking about different scenarios that we've seen with our own dogs, thinking about how our stress impacts our dogs. And so I know when I get stressed out, Radish does this thing where she will lay down on me and she will push really hard on me. And then it makes me angry because I want space. When I get angry, I want space. And she's like, nope, you want me on you. I'm like, no, I don't. And so she'll push really hard down on me and she will not get off of me or quit touching me until I take a deep breath and I'm like, okay. And I can actually feel my heart rate decreasing. And at that point, she will then leave me alone.
Wow.
And it's so fascinating to me how she does that. So, I mean, she's probably like some gifted service dog of some sort that I have no idea that that's just who she is.
Your heart rate is too fast.
Stop it.
But she absolutely, and it infuriates me. And she's such a sensitive dog. And I'm like, why do you stay on me when you can feel that I don't want you touching me? And she's like, yes, you need me though. And every time I'm like, thank you, sweetie. I'm sorry. And I sound like a raging lunatic, but I hope everybody has experienced that sometimes you get mad in life.
Yep.
And I'm not talking mad at her or anything. I'm just saying in general, I'm frustrated. And she's like, nope. Or anytime that she gets stressed, she comes and she will like bounce off of me. So she'll have this big grin and she just flies and bounces off of me. And she's like, I got to be in your skin. And I'm like, whoa. And I see that with other dogs. Like at the last seminar, there was a dog that just especially Malinois, and probably because that's the breed I work with a lot, they will absolutely climb in your skin. And that's their stress and also a response to your stress. And so I think some people see that and they're like, oh, my dog loves me so much. And, they're just so cuddly. And a lot of times that's a huge stress signal that I think some people may not understand, that the dog is just uncomfortable, either because of you or because they're just uncomfortable in general. So just things to kind of understand about some of our dogs, and not all dogs. I'm just saying sometimes.
I was thinking about the study and thinking about how, when you're training and all of a sudden your training starts going south. And
no, that never happens.
It never happens.
I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry. I can't relate.
Literally, all of a sudden, it's just like your dog looks at you like, and what planet are you from? And I swear to God, it's because you're having a stress reaction.
Yeah.
And it's a negative stress reaction versus an adrenaline dump because they did phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then things usually get worse.
I've experienced, and this is so interesting, when I do a summit with Brava, actually, whenever I compete with Brava, I always have a fluffy frisbee or some kind of a toy in the back pocket of my training vest, right? I mean, she is a food reward dog, so she gets food at the hides, but on the way back to the car, we play with whatever toy I have, and we play all the way back and everything. And when I feel really good about the search and we have this really great search, and we don't get any no's, we play, she plays tug, she rolls around in the grass. It's the cutest thing in the world. If I don't feel, and I've noticed a lot of it has to do with how I feel. If I don't feel like really great about it, or if we made an error, or if it wasn't like, if it was just like not what I wanted, even though I try to get that toy out and I try to play with her, she looks at me and she goes, no, I don't want to play. And so I go to food at that point, but I'm like, wow, it feels like that line between play and no play with her is so subtle that I know if we get a false or something, which, can happen, elite and well, actually at Summit, elite premier, she's done some elite premier, but at Summit and everything, it's easy to get a no. We come out and she's like, oh, and she's like, no, I don't want to play with you. And I'm like, hey, we had a great search. She's like, I don't believe you. And it is really, really interesting. It's kind of like, okay, she's my litmus test of how I feel coming out of the search based on whether or not she'll play with me. It's actually kind of fascinating.
I was just thinking, well, because everybody can't see it, but we have like these little notes that Crystal has copied and pasted. And I remember when Jens was here, he was talking about one of the studies where the detection dogs performed better when their handlers were under a little bit of stress.
Huh.
because they had just been told, not that they were getting fired, but that they were being reassigned to a different unit. So I think back to the episode where we were talking about teaching your dogs to be brave.
Yeah.
Where we were saying, hey, sometimes you need to have stress to help cement, basically to teach recovery.
To even sharpen your sense a little, right?
So, and Crystal had a really fantastic example as we were running through all of the bajillion things that we were running through prior to us actually jumping on a Zoom to do the call. And so literally, I'm thinking about how just a little bit of stress sharpens everything so that you perform better.
But it's got to be the good
stress.
Yeah.
It can't overwhelm you stress.
Right.
Mild handler stress can influence your working performance, but that's when you also to say the very high or chronic stress, that's going to lead to learning and memory impairment. So you have to, stress is good stress. Bad stress is bad stress, especially chronic, is not going to be helpful for either. And that's where it was interesting to say that when they had the stress in the beginning, it had less of an impact. But that's why on that third session, when they introduced that little bit of stress, that it did make a more powerful response to the positive bowl and a way bigger response to not going to the bowl that they had been empty before. They had a lot of risk aversion to that. And so we know that acute stress, you get that like narrowing focus.
Yeah.
It's the important details. You ignore all of the extraneous things. And with my experience, I used to be an athlete, and I've been blessed to have those chances to hit that game-winning home run or to hit that 3-point shot. And it's amazing. I mean, you could almost you could do no wrong. And it was in those moments, just everything felt slow motion and just so focused and perfect because of that stress. That clock was there. You could see your opponent. Like you just knew what they were going to do. It's like, sucker.
It was Matrix-like.
It was. And those moments I will forever hold because they were just so powerful. And why you can't have that all the time, I don't know. But I felt like a superhero on the court or on the field. And it was that acute stress that just, it did, like everything melted away. And I've seen that too, even when our dogs perform. I felt like I saw that even with the problem that, when Stacy set up for Radish, like I was feeling a little stressed, like going out there, like I was feeling a little stressed, it's like, okay, we haven't done a larger odor in a really long time.
The one out by the donkey in the silo field.
She was just like,
oh, that was awesome. That was so awesome.
I mean, it was so pretty, and those are those acute stress moments where I think my little bit of stress does fuel her a little bit.
Yeah.
But if I was to bring that every time, and I think especially during certifications, I was so sick and I was fighting a Lyme flare up, and I think she actually kind of got sick because I was sick, possibly. That was the weirdest thing. We both went down.
Yeah.
And then, and so that was a really strange thing for me to witness how she went so low when I was feeling terrible.
Yeah.
And so I'm still like, okay, I really have to be very thoughtful, especially with her, because she's so in tune. And so they say stress goes down the leash.
Yeah.
But here we're really seeing that they smell our stress.
Yeah.
I kind of joked, like, now I'll just say it out loud. I don't care. All these people are listening. Like, I smell my stress differently now as I've gotten older. So being 47, like I smell differently than I did just even 10 years ago. Like I can smell the difference in my odor, and especially like my stress odor versus my exercise odor. Like, I don't know if that's normal, if everybody can do that, but
no, I smell like a rose. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. So when I should tell you otherwise, or
I usually smell like donkey poop or cow poop.
Considering you're the youngest one here.
But especially working dogs, like when I was at the ranch and I was in California with Denise, and we had Joaquin, and I was catching a dog, a little French ring dog, and I was feeling stressed. I was really defeated. And it's a dog that's out of my league when it comes to my ability in that moment. And I was so down on myself, and I could smell it. I could smell myself. I know that sounds weird, but I was like, nope, I can't do another catch. And like, yes, you can. And thankfully I had really good friends there that pushed me and they weren't going to let a dog get hurt, and they weren't going to let me get hurt. And it felt like so supportive, and we worked through it. So it was such a great learning experience for me. But that was one of those moments where I could I smelled my armpit and I was like, oh my, you are so stressed. I remember thinking that. I just remember thinking that.
Wow.
And it was just funny to me that, okay, dude, if a human nose can smell it, and I'm nose blind to most things, somebody gets in my car and they're like, oh God, how do you drive this? And I'm like, drive what? It's like roses, like Stacy.
Every dog person versus non-dog person. Like you've got dog vehicles that no dog person can smell and everybody else can.
A non-dog person would be like, burn this thing down.
Right. But I get into a vehicle that has cigarette smoke and I'm like, how do you live in here?
Yeah. But I mean, so thinking about that, if I can smell it, oh my gosh, the dogs can smell it, so I think it's.
Yeah. It is really kind of interesting. Like you were talking about like different kinds of stress, right? And so I kind of was starting to think about, what I mentioned about Brava with if we have like a search that's not what I was hoping it would be. But then I started thinking that what you're also experiencing when you're talking about kind of that, like you get in the zone and all that, that's how I feel in a competition, especially like in a summit. Like I can get focused like that. But I think that's just, for me, that level of stress is just being there. Just being there gives me that level of stress. That's like that good stress of just competing. But then if I get a bad search on top of that, all of a sudden it's like I switch from the good stress to this is not positive anymore. And I think that's when it affects my dog. Because otherwise I feel like I know my dogs actually do. I think they search better in a trial. And I've always said that. And I think it's because that little bit of stress in a good way, it's just more of like an excitement stress versus a negative feeling of stress, if that makes sense. I'm trying to process this a little bit because this is a really complex subject.
The thing that I think about, and we talk a lot about certifications and trialing and all sorts of things, but I think about one of the things that even the stuff about the study where the guys were told they were switching units and the dogs searched better, they were in training, right? They weren't doing a certification. They weren't at a trial. They weren't any of that stuff. They were actually in training and a stressor was added to them and the dogs worked better. And so one of the things that I think about that is interesting for us at Distraction Camp is one where we add in stressors for the handler. And typically what happens is the dogs are spot on.
Yeah.
And the handlers kind of like have a brain part. So it's okay. But then I also think about this when we're artificially adding stress into our training to affect the dog. And I think that that's one of the things that this particular study was talking about is the adding of and oh my gosh, I feel for those people who had to take an arithmetic test because that would make my heart rate go up and would stress me out.
Yeah.
And so that level of stress, then sometimes increase the behavior of the dog going to the positive bowl. They did it faster.
Right.
So it goes back to Crystal's whole comment by us adding in stress sometimes in our training phase, not our teaching phase, our training phase, how that will crystallize things for the dogs potentially, and how that could be very, very helpful for you to think about how to put into your training progression plans. How do you add that stress in?
So how do you add it? You have to think about the timing and the magnitude.
Right.
That's the important piece because when you're looking at like human studies, if you're adding the stress in during the memory formation, that's when the little acute stressors can make task acquisition stronger. So it can make the memory encoding and the learning even more powerful. But when you put it into when you're trying to bring the memories back and then you add the stress, you're going to have a more difficult time bringing those memories back. So if you apply that kind of to our dogs, thinking about it, there's that little bit of stress that you can add in. And when I say stress, I think so I think we need to kind of clarify that too.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
So here's one that we just did. I am working on long down for Radish. And Checkmate has a really solid long down. That's how I taught UConn. I use some competition. And one of many ways that I teach it, this is just one of many. So something might say, well, this is harsh and terrible. Okay, that's cool. You can judge me. I'm good with it. I'll have Checkmate on a down and I'll have Radish next to him in a down. And I'm adding just duration, I'm adding distance, but I'm doing them separately. So I can be next to them. If Radish gets up, then I just really nicely, oh, good job, Checkmate. What a good boy. And Radish is like, wait, why am I not a good girl? And so I'll ask her to lay back down. And so that little bit of stress that's being built in, and that little bit of stress, I can see that she and UConn both have learned the long down way faster because that's that little bit of competition. And so then when I add my distance now, because my duration is built up, so now I take a few steps away and then they both get rewarded. Yay. But if she breaks, then I go back over to Checkmate. What a good man. Good job. And the other dog, the Radish in this case, is like, wait a minute. And so I just ask her to lay back down. There's no punishment, no consequence other than you didn't get the praise. You didn't get the cookie that I gave Checkmate. And the whole time Checkmate's like, dude, this is great. Usually I'm just told to lay down and I just lay here and now I'm getting some lovin's. He's like, this is great training. But that little bit of competition, I would consider that an acute stress. And so it's teaching her that concept of staying in duration or with distance or whatever I'm working on, but using the little bit of acute stress to teach her that in the acquisition phase. And she already has a down, right? So that's already taught. So this is just one little example I can think of that we was just doing a couple days ago.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of listening to what you're saying. I'm trying to process a lot of this and trying to think about some of the things that I've observed, especially on the sports side with a lot of nosework handlers and everything, and just even in general sports. And then thinking about what you were saying, Robin, about the teaching and then the training phases. So then the third phase is testing, right? So it's teaching, training, then testing.
Right.
And I think what we see with a lot of handlers, and I'm saying this partially out of experience, not in nosework, but in previous sports, trying to do previous sports with my very sensitive dog, Judd, way back when we kind of lunked out of being able to do things like agility and all that, and it was what I had interpreted as ring stress. And really trying to understand, because you talk to people who have been doing the sports for forever, and they're like, you need to do matches, you need to do all this other stuff, and ring prep. And as a new handler who's super excited to get out there and trial, because trialing is fun and it's like the social experience, that you don't really understand the necessity to do all that, and you're just like, you just want to go. You want to go have the experience, you want to go have fun. And if you don't cue, you don't cue, because that's what you tell yourself. And then you go and you don't do great, but you don't do badly. And then you keep going and it just gets progressively worse. And this is predictable, right? And I see this a lot actually with stunt work and stuff like that. And I think what it is when we think about those three phases, the teaching, the training, the testing, that I think a lot of people in sport jump from, this is a little bit of a generalization, but I'm talking about the brand new handlers. A lot of times is very enticing, specifically if you can get into like with AKC scent work, like you don't have to pass odor recognition tests. Like there's a lot of trials. You can basically trial any weekend you want, right? They go straight from teaching to testing.
Yes.
And they actually skip the training phase. And then I think what happens is that you add those stressors, right? Inappropriate time. So now you're not feeling stressed in teaching. Now all of a sudden you're in testing and now you're feeling stressed because now you've got ring nerves. That's what that stress is. It's like, I'm doing this. I'm nervous. I step to the start line and it goes okay. And then because, you've done your training has been probably okay, right? Dog can probably find the thing. It's probably not super complicated. And so, you may even get that green ribbon and you're all excited and everything. So that actually reinforces you to go and do it again. But what you find is over a period of time, it starts to get harder. And those green ribbons become fewer and fewer. And next thing you know, you're struggling and you get out there and you're telling your dog, find it, find it, find it, find it. And they're not finding it. And I'm going back to like my own experience where it's like, I started out, my first did a little agility trial and everything was fun. It was great. over a period of time, he'd go to the top of the A-frame. He didn't want to come down again. And he was stressed. And then he basically just wanted to leave the ring. And it got to the point he had to quit the entire sport. And I hadn't done that sport again until I got Brava, started back in it. So as an example, and it was interesting. So I'm thinking about everything that we're saying here, and then thinking about that teaching to training to testing and trying to understand really what goes on with that phenomenon and why so many new handlers struggle. I think it's that. I think it's that stress, that inappropriate application of stress at the wrong phase that causes that. So that's kind of my theory based on this discussion that we're having.
This is why everything I try to teach it in a very positive emotional state. And I will allow a large criteria. So I don't narrow it down to some really tiny little thing. It's, are they close? Cool. Did they try? Awesome. I'm still going to reward them just for trying. Even if they didn't do it right. And I'll try to set up my next repetition so they can get closer to being right. I want to shape the attitude. I want to shape the happiness. I want to shape that this is the way I want you to feel about this behavior. Because when I have the right attitude, the right feeling, then as we continue down the path, we can start getting the criteria tighter and tighter and tighter to what I need it to be. So I think that's an important part of when to add in the stress and getting that attitude correct in the beginning. And that's also for myself. If I start off in a rush, or if I start off, especially with timelines of, certifications or trials or whatever coming up, I can feel myself with that little, I always imagine that little sand dial, or what's that called? Like the hourglass.
Hourglass.
I can almost feel that sand like pouring down on my shoulders, and I can feel that weight.
Yep.
And I will literally, I feel like I have to shake off the sand first is kind of what I'm visualizing. And that then I can train my dog. And so most sessions I start with play because I need to get myself in the right place. And I also then can connect with my dog and have, him or her in the right place.
Yeah.
So that's part of my de-stressing. And I think through our play, we also kind of figure out where our stress levels are and where our interests are. So that's just a personal way that I handle it.
And I was thinking about Stacy's comments about the young handlers. And I was a young handler 2 weeks ago where I went and did by the time this airs, it's been a couple of weeks when I did the hunt test. And one of the rituals that has started happening in the blind is Bristol will lean her head against my leg and close her eyes, and I pet her head. And I just sit there and I just slowly pet her head. And the amount of connection that creates in her and I walking to the line is immense. But then you have Flash, on the other hand, who is all about, Mom, what do you want me to do? But I have to do it like exuberance and all over the place, like a free floating ion at this point.
She's yellow. She's happy.
She's a happy color. She's not quite 2, and she hasn't matured into some of the stuff. And I don't want to squash the enthusiasm. So it's okay with me. But I think it's really funny because we talk about this stress in both of the times where Flash, because Bristol's like, here, hold my beer. I'm glad you were Uber. Let me just do the thing, right? Literally, that was her. Flash is like, I got hit in the head by a duck decoy. I don't know what I'm doing. And literally, I can replay the exact second where I didn't step in and handle in that situation. And the next day when I made a mistake and didn't help her out.
Can you explain the get hit in the head though? Because that was kind of a funny visual.
It was. And I think probably
everybody's like, how did she get hit in the head with the decoy?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So one of the things that they do it's a junior hunter, right? It's a new thing for me. So it was a junior hunter. I was nervous at the line. Send me fun memes. It's fine. They had put some duck decoys out that were in the water. We were in the water series, and Flash goes flying off the line, hits the water. And as she hits the water, she comes up perfectly. So the duck decoy that's floating on the top of the water just lightly bonks her in the head right on the right side. And she's like, oh my gosh, what is that thing? And so she literally had to sniff it a lot. She's like, sniff, 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 sniff. What are you? And then the one that was exactly on the other side of her bonked her on the other side of the head. And she's like, oh my gosh, what are you? I don't know what that is. So she had to sniff that one too. And then she looked at me and she's like, I forgot what I was doing.
Because she made all these new friends.
And she did. And if I had chosen that moment to give her a back cast, she would have been like, oh, got it. And turned around and went and I would like bet money that she would have turned around and went and got the doc.
Yeah. That's the difference between the experienced and the novice handler.
Right. And you know what? And the only way I am going to get that experience is by stepping to the line.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I also know and took from that and the mistake that happened the next day was that I have training holes. And I am very excited that there are no more junior hunter opportunities that I can register for within driving distance of my house. Well, there are, but I'm not going because I have
force you into training the.
Right. Because guess what? I will spend the next 6 months training to fix those holes, and it will be fine because it's about the training with my dog. But that stress that was added to me in those two particular instances with Flash has crystallized. And I can now imagine, and I have actually rehearsed it in my head, if that happens again at this particular time in this particular situation, this is what I'm going to do. So I learned the lessons, and I tell people all the time, Bristol got her ribbons, but I should have, in the little picture I have of Bristol and Flash, I should have put little blue ribbons on Flash's collar because she taught me so much that if I hadn't entered to her and I hadn't gone and I hadn't failed, I wouldn't have learned as much as I did.
Yeah.
So that's one of those times when failing is really important. So anyway, that was a total digression off of, but it was stress.
It's not, because it's also reminding me, it's kind of like the whole new handler versus experienced handler. And I realize every time I take out a dog, like it's easier.
Yes.
And it's just easier. But I think part of it is that like, I don't get trial nerves unless maybe sometimes at Summit now, like that's it. So, you take a dog out and you're like, okay, well, this is just fun. And I've done this before, and this is my, sixth dog or whatever. And trialing, it's like, it's different. And I think that's a huge part of it. And we are, I think, in the more experience we get, we just naturally go through the teaching and the training more thoroughly than sometimes when we do it the first time. Because when we go the first time, we don't necessarily know what those holes could be.
Correct.
Right. So we don't eliminate them before we test it because we don't even know what they could be.
Yes.
And then we go and we do the trial or whatever, like, oh, I had never thought of that. But that's something that, next time, I don't know, it's fascinating.
There was something else that the study mentioned about the sniffing lateralization, as we typically, if you wanted to look it up for something to like rabbit hole on. That's the idea that the right nostril of the dog is processed in the right hemisphere, because with the olfactory nervous fibers in the dogs, they're not crossed. So the right nostril is associated with the right hemisphere activation. And the reason that becomes important from studies back from 2016 and even earlier is that dogs tend to use their right nostril when they're sniffing like arousal odors. So think adrenaline or veterinarian sweat. And so a lot of times they'll consider the right hemisphere is involved in analyzing threatening stimuli. And then the familiar odors on the left nostril, that's the non-aversive odors. So think about food. So the left hemisphere probably controls behavioral responses to familiar. So like to handlers and to happiness. And I've been finding it really fascinating that when I'm doing building searches, I'm doing room searches, especially interiors when I really notice it, that when I do a pass on the right side, so that Radish's right nose is toward where the odor is going to be, it feels like she takes it in differently. Mm-hmm. And then when I turn back around and I do a pass with her on the left, she keys in so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been something that I keep noting in my log and that I keep noticing in when I watch back in videos. And then I'm even thinking about, we were doing a decompression wash after a really beautiful search. I was so proud of her. And at one moment, she kind of froze in the gravel and her nose went up. And I saw that right nostril just really start to flare. And you could see the right nostril was doing all the work. And sure enough, in the cornfield straight ahead, there were a couple coyotes.
Wow.
Oh.
And it was really cool to see that. And it was like, okay. And I took note of that. That was like 3 days ago. And I just was, it was one of those where I'm like, okay, I see that. And she did the whole, like the low grrr. She was like, target acquired, don't like that target. And then Yukon is like, I'm Yukon and I'm just going down the gravel road. And I'm like, Yukon, let's go this way. He's like, okay, let's go that way now. I'm like, oh, Yukon, I love you. And he's the one that almost got attacked by the koi and didn't even notice they were there. And I'm like throwing him in the van as I'm like racing in one day, but it's Yukon. He's a lovely boy. But then I'm even thinking about here at the house, even just today, and we were just snuggling just for a minute, just to kind of like relax. And her little left nostril just was going. And I was like, that's so cute. So just something I'm a little more in tune with, but it's interesting because I wasn't thinking about it until we started talking about this right before.
Mm-hmm.
And Stacy had mentioned too, she's like, well, the left side's the happy side. And I've noticed that right nostril really kicking it hard a few times. And then that was the first time today that I really noticed the left side. So I'm going to try to pay more attention to that. But I like that the study reminded me of it.
I've found that I have a more effective search if I start to the left. I just feel like my dogs are like, especially Brava, actually, she seems to be more sensitive to that she's a little bit more like the rhythm is better, like she's more effective. And what's really interesting is also, so I've noticed that. And so I tend to use that to my advantage. So if I can go to the left, if it makes sense, I'll go to the left first. The other thing I've noticed is that if you go down the line of containers or on an arc of containers, first of all, it does affect which way I may start if I've got a certain kind of pattern. The other thing is I've noticed my dogs, like if they're going to work on either the right side or the left side of the containers, they will orient themselves so that their left nostril is working the container. It's fascinating. It's not as common for them to orient the right.
You're going through all of that. And I realize that now when I talk search strategy, I'm like, I don't care which way you pick, just pick a direction. I always go to the left first.
Yeah.
I am a right-handed person, but I go to the left. And we were doing boxes and cans today. And I realized, and I always go to the left first. And it's really interesting because I split my training building in half because I did narcotics on one side and firearms on one side and explosives in the middle. And yeah, my world is entertaining. And even when starting the narcotics dogs, it required me to walk all the way to the far end of the building.
Uh-huh.
Not like it's a huge distance, but I walked all the way down to the other end of the building so that when I started them, they were on my left side.
Yeah.
Going to the left.
Yeah. I found that if I have to go with my containers, like, because, we don't get to choose a start line, it's
right,
et cetera, and it's all timed and stuff, that if the line itself is kind of off to my right, when I start, what's really interesting is a lot of times my dogs will work on the opposite side of the containers from me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. And it actually puts their left nostril onto the containers. And I leverage that. So we will actually work. So they're on the opposite side of the containers because it actually gets that nostril on the containers. I'm giving everybody my secrets at this point. And then, if I need to turn their direction, now they're oriented left on left again.
Right.
I think I've been told a lot to think about their footedness, if they're left-footed or right-footed, and that's the way to take and use a room search. But I'm leaning more toward thinking about this more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting.
And maybe they're all left-footed, and that's why,
I don't think it's the feet. I think it's...
Because that's, to find out footedness too, that's if you throw a toy or something, and then if they pick it up, which way do they turn? And so which way do they turn consistently? So I use that for my retrieve. So if they consistently turn to the left, then when I'm going to call them back from picking something up, I take a few steps to the right. So that way they're really coming back to me tight because that's what I need for my sport. So that's why the footedness can kind of matter. For like
that matters stuff. For you. Right.
Yeah.
So I know we were talking, we kind of, this is one of those episodes that welcome to sitting
what was our topic?
In the back seat of the car while we have conversations, or if you were a fly on the wall while we sit around and talk training, right? That's what we do.
Yeah.
And so when we start thinking about stress and us doing stress things and putting stress on our dogs, what are some of your other ahas?
About stress?
Well, stress.
So my aha that I've been really working on hard lately is that if my dog is not at the right level, and I look at that as being whether they're under-aroused, over-aroused, stressed out, not stressed out. So I think that's how it applies in my brain. On a number scale of 1 to 10, I want my dog at an 8. So if they're at a 9, they're on that border of me losing them because they're just a little too high, too energetic. And if they're at a 7, I have a chance of losing them because they may get distracted by the environment or something else going on. So it's kind of like when you mentioning that at the end of the game, when I just felt like it was in the Matrix, it's that same feeling. I want my dog in the Matrix. And for me, that's a level 8. And we were just talking about that yesterday. Nancy and I were training here. Ronnie came to visit. Hi, Ronnie. She was on one of our previous episodes. And we were having a really nice session. And with Checkmate, I was using some of my turns to try to get him to go tight to connect to get him into an 8. And Nancy was like, you need to think about that because there's going to be other ways. And so some other ways for him that I'm finding is that connection of a collar. So if I say collar, he runs over and he slams his neck into my hand, whether he has a collar on or not. And then if I kind of push him away a little, then I run away and I say collar again. Well, he really loves that. And he starts like really pushing into me. And then I can go to a contact heel, again, contact. And that really seems to get the engagement up because he gets that adrenaline up. And then he's more likely to be into what I'm doing versus what the environment has to offer. And so the environment in that day, it had a bite suit and it had toys on a shelf and it was in his backyard. And so there was already a lot of layers that were happening there. And so I want to get my dogs to an 8 before I ask them any sort of go do a thing, whether it's with me or away from me. So that's the stress part that I'm looking at because I think it is stressful for him when he really wants that competing motivator of that suit and that toy. I need to kind of mitigate that stress with what is it that I need you to do in order to get that.
That's the thought about the 7, the 8, the 9. And I'm just reflecting on I did an elite premiere with Powder. And actually, I shared this video of this search on my wall and I shared it on Sensibly's Nosework training. It was a press box search. So we were searching the inside of a press box. And we had a little bit of a rough morning because she was at a 9 for the morning and it was too much, right? This is what happens when you don't train because you're focusing on other things. And I go into the search thing and, I gotta focus you, right? And I did a little bit of focus work to just try to tighten her up a little bit, which was definitely working. But I could tell that the amount of odor and her excitement, she was still very fizzy and she was still kind of at the 9.
I love fizzy. I love that.
That's how it feels. Like it feels like
she was fizzy.
Like you pop the top and it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
Did I shake it up too much? Has it calmed down? That's my new visual. I love it.
Yeah. It feels like carbonation, right? So what I ended up doing was I'm like, all right, there was a threshold height and she came past. I saw a change of behavior and then she kind of kept going. And I'm like, come here, sweetheart. And I presented the area. And I explained in this post how that presentation actually worked to bring her arousal down just a little bit. If we think about your number scale that you just used, it basically took her from a 9 to an 8. And 8 is where she likes to work and 8 is her comfort zone. And then she did such a nice job. We won the search, but it was definitely like working through the arousal by just trying to tighten it up into that 8 during the search itself through a little bit of handling, but not over handling. We call intentional handling, right? And so what you just said just kind of got in my head in terms of like that number and how you can adjust that as you handle and that whole idea of the fizzy environmental type of focus, and then just kind of adding slight handler focus can just kind of like ratchet that down just back just a little bit, just enough.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'm also kind of thinking about ways that we can, I love when I talked about the pessimism and the optimism. And one of the things they also mentioned, let me see, was it 2 weeks? Was that the amount of time they said? I think I put it in the notes. I can't find the thing now.
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
Can you see it?
No.
There was a study by Duraton et al. That dogs exhibited a more optimistic emotional state after participating in 2 weeks of daily activities that focused on using their sense of smell. So all the olfactory-based activities. So what I love about that study is just suggesting that when you're engaging a dog's olfactory system, that you can positively impact their mood and their well-being. Yeah. And so I think that's what I love so much about, we talk about stress, doing it in the right way and letting the dogs really be superheroes with their nose as they are. What a cool thing that we get to do to experience detection dogs doing what they're so amazing at, and that we can see that optimistic emotional state. So we can see that left nostril, we can see the drive to odor, those are such powerful things. And that's what's so motivating for me, and the constant little challenges and games that we have. That's what I just thrive on so much with working with our dogs.
Yeah.
So the stress side of it, that's kind of what I take it back to there too. It's just the fact that we get to do something that already is going to make our dogs more optimistic.
Yeah.
So yay for Duraton et al.
And I enjoy, that's one of those things. I'm sure people have heard this, sniffaries, right? And I think about a lot of us allowing our dogs to explore their world through their nose, because that's part of what makes them them. And it's interesting for me, for the first time in probably a year, I took my dogs for a walk today because yay for knee surgery and all of those things.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my.
Yeah. So instead of running the dogs on the quad or on the mule and all of those sorts of things, I'm like 7 months post-op. Well, almost 9 months post-op now. Oh, maybe a little more than that. Anyway. But so I actually got to take my dogs for a walk, which was fantastic. And they loved. Plus they got to roll around in a pedal. But they got to sniff things, which they don't normally get to do, because if I'm on the quad, we're going too fast. And so even as my working dogs, I think it's important for them to be able to go out and sniff their world a little bit. But okay, so we need to do reflections.
Oh, geez.
That wasn't a reflection.
I know, that wasn't a reflection.
That was a reflection.
That was not a reflection. That
wasn't? Okay, we were just still talking.
Don't be afraid. I mean, a lot of people are like, I don't want my dog to pull on a walk. You know what? Give them 15 minutes so that they can go.
I have a reflection. That's
okay,
good.
so let me add that to Robin's. If you're looking for obedience stuff, then consider changing equipment. So have a harness and a collar on.
Yes.
Consider having a longer line. So if you switch from the collar to the harness, well, now you can pull. So if those are considerations that you're like, I need this controlled for this idea, then consider those things. Okay, just I had to throw it in there. I was compelled. Go ahead.
Are we on reflections now?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Yeah. I needed to add that little piece in before you did your reflection, because it was pertinent.
Okay. Yeah, I think I just want to go back to the comments that I was making about the whole new handler and the teaching, training, testing. So if you're a new handler, honestly, the biggest thing I can say is don't rush the training. Don't trial too early. And the reason is because you're shortchanging that important part where you're thoughtfully adding the right stress to the picture so that you're going to be a lot more effective when you get to the testing part of it if you don't shortchange that. So that's just my comment, mostly to the novice handlers, because it really is important.
And if people are wondering about the teaching, training, testing thing, I am going to I have a whole webinar that's associated with teaching, training, and testing your dog. That will go out on the Canine Census on demand section that you can purchase.
Your webinars are fantastic, by the way.
They're awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Fun.
So literally my reflection on this is the concept of adding good stress. And I think I do that a lot using bridges and things of that nature in my training. But I even think about how can I add good stress into my training at select times so that it helps with resiliency. And there's this whole concept of, oh, your dog always has to end on a good note. And no, it does not. Sometimes you just need to end because otherwise you end up training in things that you don't want. So
don't train till it's ugly, right?
Yep. Do not train.
If it's already ugly. It's going to get uglier.
Yes.
When we talk about the optimism and pessimism, so my takeaway there was the pessimistic response that they talked about was obviously a negative emotional state, but they talked about it as a way for the dog to conserve energy and avoid disappointment. And I pictured Yukon sniffing and there's that displacement. So I really took that to heart. I'm getting all choked up. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. There's a difference.
Just straight up choking. That's just like standard joke.
I was going to go with it. I'm like, let's make this really emotional.
No, you're just
joking.
Right.
I've just been talking a lot today with school. So yeah, that pessimistic response, what I'm feeling from that when they said that it's about conserving energy and avoiding disappointment, I was not thinking about it necessarily as avoiding disappointment for them, but also avoiding disappointment from us. And that little line hit me hard because it talks about emotional contagion. And when I think about that, and I'm adding that now into my thoughts about my training, I know how important it is for me to be in the right state of mind, especially in that learning acquisition phase when I'm teaching my dog something new. And that's sometimes when I do feel that I get frustrated easier because I'm like, why aren't you getting this? And that why aren't you getting this is directed at myself. But that doesn't matter because that same emotional energy is going out. And they're picking up what I'm putting out. And I know that. I mean, they can smell it. And this is just this study. I like that it's giving me a reminder that it's there and I need to be aware of it. And one of the quotes that they said in it, this is from Dr. Zoe Parr-Cortez. And it says, dog owners know how attuned their pets are to their emotions. But here we show that even the odor of a stressed, unfamiliar human affects a dog's emotional state, perception of rewards, and ability to learn. Working dog handlers often describe stress traveling down the lead, but we've also shown it can also travel through the air. So I'm going to really take this home and implement this in my training, even in as soon as I get off here, I'm going to go train my dogs and I'm not going to bring that stress into my training.
Excellent. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in for some more of our fun little ramblings. As always, if you have suggestions, there is a post out on the Facebook page. Please submit your suggestion through the form because that allows us to track what we have and we haven't talked about because sometimes we forget. And we greatly appreciate all of you tuning in to what we have to say. Make sure to check out the show notes for upcoming classes, all sorts of the cool things that we're up to, and we hope to see you there. For now, go train.
Canine Detection Collaborative! We appreciate the time you spend with us. If you liked this episode, not only should you follow us so you don't miss the next one, but please also rate and review us in your favorite podcast app. For info on collaborating with us, go to k9detectioncollaborative.com. That's K9detectioncollaborative.com, where you can find our socials and pick up our latest monthly freebie. Join us again to talk training in the next episode.